What if the world you think you know is nothing but a negotiation table, a battlefield dressed in polite smiles and contracts? What if the quiet anxieties that gnaw at you every morning, the dread of being overlooked, outmaneuvered, or outpowered, are echoes of a war you never chose to fight, but one you're forced to play in every interaction, every decision, every ambition? In the dim glow of your phone at 3 a.m., when your mind spins with overthinking, doubts, and unfinished conversations, have you ever wondered whether there is a strategy, an ancient key, that could cut through the noise and restore clarity to your place in this endless game of life? This is the hidden mirror of our age, the tension between the chaos of modern existence and the timeless wisdom buried in texts written long before skyscrapers and stock markets. We scroll endlessly, yet feel emptier with each flick of the thumb. We measure success by followers and fleeting likes, but secretly dread the silence that follows. The truth is, beneath the chaos, beneath the avalanche of digital overwhelm, there is a hunger, not for more information, but for direction. A hunger for strategy, clarity, and a way to reclaim sovereignty over our emotions and decisions. Here is where the ancient voice of Sun Tzu rises again, whispering through the dust of centuries. His words from The Art of War were not written for armies alone. They were crafted as living principles, blueprints of how to navigate human conflict, how to turn disadvantage into opportunity, how to command not only troops, but the hidden battlefield of the mind. And strangely, when cast against the unpredictable theater of our modern world, his wisdom resonates with the movements of unlikely figures, leaders who have mastered the art of bending chaos to their will, even when the world calls them divisive. Among them, one name stands out with both reverence and controversy: Donald Trump. Whatever one thinks of him politically, to ignore his negotiation style is to ignore a living embodiment of strategy in motion. His methods are brash, often polarizing, yet they expose something that mirrors Sun Tzu's teachings: the use of unpredictability as a weapon, the ability to reshape the battlefield through perception rather than force, the art of keeping opponents perpetually off balance. When you strip away the noise of politics, what emerges is a case study in strategy, mindset, and psychological maneuvering. But before we explore this fusion, before we see how the wisdom of an ancient Chinese general finds strange echoes in the boardrooms, debates, and negotiations of a modern leader, we must confront the chaos of our own times. For what good is wisdom if it floats above our heads like a constellation too far to touch? The real challenge is not merely to study strategy, but to apply it, to navigate our relationships, our careers, our inner battles with the same clarity and discipline that Sun Tzu demanded from his generals. Imagine what could shift in your life if you began to see every anxious conversation, every job interview, every difficult relationship not as random suffering, but as a field of war where clarity, preparation, and mindset mastery determine the outcome. If you pause here for a moment and ask yourself, what would it mean for me to live as if every encounter carried a hidden architecture? What if every obstacle was not just resistance but terrain, and every silence not a void but a weapon? Already, your perspective begins to shift. Already, you sense that strategy is not about others. It is about mastering yourself, reclaiming emotional sovereignty, and reconnecting with purpose in a world that thrives on distraction. This is why I invite you, not merely as a viewer, but as a seeker, to become part of this journey. Subscribe to Mindset Mastery Hub, not just to watch another video, but to join a global conversation where ancient wisdom meets modern clarity. Here, we do not chase motivation like a sugar high. We uncover frameworks of resilience, discipline, and transformation that can anchor you against the storm of daily chaos. Each subscription is less a click and more a declaration that you are done with excuses, that you are ready to master the negotiation within yourself before facing the one outside. The story we are about to unravel is not about politics. It is about principles. It is not about admiration or disdain for a man, but about what he represents, the embodiment of strategic daring in an age of noise. As Sun Tzu declared, all warfare is based on deception. But deception is not always malicious. It can also be the art of positioning, the discipline of presenting yourself not as you are forced to be, but as you choose to be. Donald Trump's negotiation style, often dismissed as mere bravado, reflects this, a continuous shaping of perception, a dance with unpredictability, an understanding that in war, whether with armies or words, control belongs to the one who can define the battlefield. Think of your own life. How often have you lost the battle before it began? Not because the other person was stronger, but because you surrendered control of the frame? Perhaps you walked into a meeting already apologizing with your body language, or stayed in a relationship where the negotiation of respect was skewed long before you found the courage to walk away. Perhaps the war is with yourself each morning, when comfort whispers more persuasively than discipline. In each of these arenas, you are already at war. The only question is, are you fighting with clarity, or are you wandering blind? This is the doorway we now stand before. The merging of Sun Tzu's timeless text with the living, controversial theater of Trump's negotiation tactics. Together, they reveal not just strategies of power, but deeper truths about human psychology, influence, and survival. Once you glimpse this alignment, once you see how these patterns echo across centuries, you will never look at conflict or at your own life the same way again. And so, the loop opens. Ahead lies a journey through the pillars of strategy, the symbolic undercurrents of negotiation, and the practical lessons that can transform your decisions, your focus, and your destiny. For those who have ever felt overwhelmed by modern life, caught in the tides of uncertainty, or betrayed by their own hesitation, the promise is clear. Once you understand how ancient wisdom flows into modern strategy, your reality will shift irrevocably. When we step beyond the hook of fear and desire, when we lift our gaze from the battlefield of distraction and begin to study the architecture of conflict, we arrive at the essence of Sun Tzu's wisdom. The Art of War is not a book of blood and blades. It is a text about perception, about shaping reality so that victory occurs before the first strike. It is about control, not the control of others, but the control of space, timing, and above all, the self. In its pages, we find instructions for generals, yes, but more importantly, we find the eternal guidance for mastering the terrain of life, business, politics, and the hidden theater of the mind. One of Sun Tzu's most famous insights declares, if you know the enemy and know yourself, you need not fear the result of 100 battles. Notice the duality here. Knowledge of the enemy is vital, but knowledge of the self is the pillar. To negotiate, to lead, to overcome adversity, one must first pierce the fog of their own illusions. This is where Donald Trump's negotiation style intersects in unexpected ways. Whether through instinct or deliberate calculation, he embodies this dual awareness. A sharp reading of the opponent's weaknesses, combined with an almost theatrical clarity of his own identity. He enters the room already defining the terms of the encounter, already projecting a self-image so forceful that even detractors cannot ignore it. In Sun Tzu's language, he seizes the high ground before the first arrow flies. But beneath this tactical parallel lies something deeper. It is the principle of frame control, a concept well known not only to strategists, but to psychologists. Carl Jung would have seen this as a dance between archetypes, the persona, the shadow, the ego, and the self. Trump, consciously or not, plays with these archetypes in the public square. He projects confidence and dominance, the king archetype in Jungian psychology, but he also forces his opponents into reactive roles. Just as Sun Tzu advised generals to lure enemies into disadvantageous positions, Trump's negotiation style often provokes, agitates, and destabilizes until the opponent has lost composure. At that point, the battle is already decided. We may recoil at this or admire it, but the principle remains timeless. Emotional sovereignty is the foundation of all negotiation. Sun Tzu might not have used the phrase, but the essence is there. To lose control of your emotions is to surrender the battlefield. In the digital age, this battlefield extends far beyond war rooms or debate stages. It lives in our inboxes, our arguments with partners, our fragile self-worth as we compare ourselves endlessly to others online. Each notification is a skirmish, each wave of anxiety a siege. To survive, one must cultivate what the Stoics called ataraxia, and what modern motivational thinkers like Jim Rohn reframed as self-discipline, the ability to maintain clarity, calm, and composure no matter the storm. Discipline, then, is not chains but freedom. It is the shield against manipulation. Discipline equals freedom, as modern thinkers echo, because only through restraint can you step back from the emotional traps set by others. Sun Tzu's general who rushes forward in anger is already defeated. The modern individual who reacts impulsively to criticism or rejection is already ensnared. Donald Trump's negotiation style, love it or loathe it, thrives precisely because he understands this asymmetry. If he provokes and you react, you are playing on his terms. This is anticipatory awareness, the ability to act as though you are the architect of the battlefield, not its victim. Here, another voice joins the chorus. Viktor Frankl, the existential psychiatrist who survived the concentration camps and wrote that in every circumstance, between stimulus and response, there lies a space, and in that space lies our power and freedom. Is this not the ultimate art of war? To master that space within the self, to pause before reaction, to choose the higher ground of clarity over the swamp of impulsivity. Emotional sovereignty is the new generalship, and every life, whether corporate or personal, is shaped by whether we master that gap or collapse into it. Consider how Sun Tzu's insistence on preparation aligns with modern neuroscience. Studies show that the brain, when overwhelmed, defaults to primal reactions. Anxiety narrows focus, anger distorts perception. Negotiation experts know this well. Whoever keeps calm longest controls the frame. Trump, whether by training or instinct, leans into this principle, overwhelming the environment until others are forced into reactive limbic responses. He may appear chaotic, but beneath the surface is a consistent application of Sun Tzu's dictum. Appear at points which the enemy must hasten to defend. March swiftly to places where you are not expected. In other words, force them into defense while you define the offensive terrain. The Stoics would have smiled knowingly here. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." What is negotiation but a test of this principle? In business, in politics, in daily life, the terrain is less important than the state of mind with which you enter it. If you master your mindset, the outcome bends toward you. If you collapse into distraction or insecurity, you hand victory to the other before words are exchanged. Mindset mastery is not self-help fluff. It is warfare at the deepest level, and its practice requires the same rigor Sun Tzu demanded of his generals. The patterns extend further still. In Taoism, Lao Tzu speaks of the power of water, soft, yielding, yet unbreakable. In negotiation, this principle manifests as adaptability. Trump's style often oscillates between hard dominance and sudden conciliatory gestures, leaving opponents uncertain. Critics may call this inconsistency, but Sun Tzu would recognize it as strategic fluidity. To be predictable is to be vulnerable. To flow like water is to hold the advantage. This is the paradox of strength. It is found not in rigidity, but in controlled adaptability. And so we circle back to the modern seeker, you, the viewer, the one who feels the tension of the digital storm pressing against your psyche. What use is it to study Trump or Sun Tzu if it remains an abstraction? The answer is simple. These principles illuminate the universal laws of conflict, influence, and resilience. They remind us that the same forces at work in high-stakes negotiations are at work when you argue with yourself in the mirror, when you struggle to stay disciplined, when you reach for comfort instead of growth. Growth mindset is not a slogan. It is survival. No more excuses, no surrender to distraction. Each choice is a battlefield, each thought an army, each habit a fortress, either built or destroyed. This is why philosophy matters. This is why ancient texts endure. Sun Tzu, Marcus Aurelius, Carl Jung, Viktor Frankl. They are not voices of the past. They are strategies for now. They remind us that the true art of war is not destruction, but transformation. To lead others, you must first lead yourself. To master negotiation, you must master perception. To gain clarity in chaos, you must be willing to confront your own shadow, heal your own wounds, and build your own discipline. And here lies the invitation. As we peel back these layers, as we compare the battlefield strategies of ancient generals and modern negotiators, we are not merely studying history or politics. We are uncovering the architecture of human interaction itself, the secret currents that shape every decision, every conflict, every victory. Once you see these currents, you can never unsee them. You will recognize them in boardrooms, in friendships, in arguments with yourself at midnight, and you will know that the power to navigate them lies not in force, but in clarity. There are truths so profound that they cannot be captured through logic alone. They must be experienced through story, through the symbolic language that speaks not to the surface mind, but to the depths of the unconscious. Sun Tzu himself, in his terse aphorisms, often sounded less like a general and more like a poet. His verses hinted at rivers and mountains, shadows and flames, illusions and reflections. Likewise, Jung taught us that beneath the rational ego lies a landscape of archetypes, timeless characters and images that shape the way we live, fight, and negotiate. To truly grasp the connection between the art of war and Donald Trump's negotiation style, we must descend into this symbolic underworld where parables and metaphors become maps of reality. Imagine first the myth of the chessboard. Two kings face each other, their armies aligned in neat rows, yet the game is never won by sheer force. It is won by deception, by sacrifice, by feints that lure the opponent into blind spots. In this myth, Sun Tzu is the invisible hand guiding the pieces, whispering that victory is not about how many pawns you hold, but how skillfully you position them. Now, transpose this to the modern stage. Donald Trump enters a negotiation not with the careful politeness of a diplomat, but with the unpredictability of a storm. He sacrifices a pawn, an outrageous statement, a shocking move, not to win in that moment, but to shift the opponent's psychology, to reframe the board itself. Like a chess master, he provokes reactions, and in those reactions, he reads the soul of his opponent. But there is another allegory, older than chess. In the Taoist tradition, there is the parable of the empty boat. A man rowing across a foggy river collides with another boat. He curses in fury, ready to fight, until he realizes the boat is empty. His rage collapses into absurdity. The lesson: anger arises not from events themselves, but from the stories we project onto them. In negotiation, Trump often becomes the empty boat, embodying a style so confounding, so resistant to conventional reading, that opponents rage against him, only to discover they are fighting their own projections. Sun Tzu would smile at this, for he warned that the greatest generals win not by strength, but by making the enemy defeat themselves. To dive even deeper, let us consider the archetype of the trickster. Every culture holds this figure: Loki in Norse myth, Coyote in Native American lore, Hermes in Greek tradition. The trickster disrupts order, bends rules, unsettles certainties. He is often ridiculed, but his power lies in unpredictability. Trump, intentionally or instinctively, channels this archetype in negotiations. He confounds expectations, refuses to follow the script, creates chaos where others expect structure. His opponents often overextend, attempting to restore order, only to fall into traps of their own making. Sun Tzu's axiom, be extremely subtle, even to the point of formlessness. Be extremely mysterious, even to the point of soundlessness, is echoed here. The trickster embodies formlessness, and those who fight him as if he were predictable are already ensnared. Yet symbolic narratives are not only about external tactics, they illuminate inner landscapes. The negotiation table is a mirror of the battlefield within. Jung's archetype of the shadow reveals this. The parts of ourselves we suppress or deny become the very forces that sabotage us in moments of conflict. Sun Tzu's teaching: if ignorant of both your enemy and yourself, you are sure to be defeated in every battle, points to the same truth. How often do people fail in negotiation, not because of external weakness, but because their unacknowledged shadows, fear of rejection, need for validation, unresolved insecurity, bleed into their strategy? Trump's seeming indifference to criticism, his relentless projection of certainty, whether authentic or theatrical, reflects a strategic embrace of the shadow. He does not apologize for the qualities others might suppress. Instead, he weaponizes them, turning flaws into symbols of power. This is alchemy, the transformation of inner chaos into outer advantage. Consider also the allegory of the battlefield as a mirror of the human psyche. In ancient myth, wars between gods and demons were never merely external. They reflected cosmic struggles within the soul. Sun Tzu's strategies echo this metaphysical truth. War is fought not only in open fields, but in the minds of those who command. Likewise, modern negotiation is less about contracts and more about psychology. Trump's negotiation theater is rife with spectacle, but beneath it lies a profound psychological war. Who controls the narrative? Who bends perception? Who frames the meaning of the encounter? In a sense, negotiation becomes mythic, a clash of archetypes more than arguments. And yet, myths do not exist only to glorify. They exist to teach. The trickster is not invincible. The chess master can be cornered. The empty boat can be filled with hidden threats. The point is not to idolize, but to decode, to see through the symbols to the lessons that apply to our own lives. Sun Tzu teaches that strategy is universal, and Trump's style, however polarizing, is a living case study of these patterns in motion. The symbolic narratives remind us that every negotiation we face, whether with a boss, a partner, or our own inner critic, is part of a larger mythological script. We are all characters on the chessboard, boats on the river, tricksters in disguise, shadows seeking integration. Let us not forget the hero's journey, as described by Joseph Campbell. The hero must leave the ordinary world, face trials, descend into chaos, and emerge transformed. What is negotiation if not a microcosm of this journey? You enter the arena with uncertainty, face opposition, wrestle with doubt, and if you master yourself, return with newfound strength. Sun Tzu provides the map. Trump exemplifies one controversial path across it. But ultimately, it is you, the viewer, who must undertake the journey. To negotiate is to step into the unknown, to embrace challenges rather than flee them, to grow stronger in the crucible of conflict. And here lies the deeper invitation. When you see negotiation symbolically, you realize it is not confined to politics or business. It is in your decision to wake at dawn or sleep through the alarm, in your choice to speak your truth or remain silent, in your struggle to discipline your habits rather than surrender to comfort. Each day is an allegory, each moment a battlefield, each obstacle a teacher disguised as an enemy. If you approach life this way, you no longer resent the challenges. You embrace them as sacred trials that sharpen your clarity and deepen your resilience. This is where Sun Tzu's voice merges with the modern chorus of motivational thinkers. Jim Rohn reminded us that discipline is the bridge between goals and accomplishment. Napoleon Hill taught that definiteness of purpose transforms thought into reality. Motiversity channels declare, grind over comfort, no more excuses. Beneath their varied language, the archetypal pattern remains. Life is war, but not war of violence. War of mindset. Trump's negotiation theatrics, Sun Tzu's aphorisms, Jung's archetypes, and the hero's journey all point to the same revelation. To master negotiation is to master life itself. And so, as we close this symbolic passage, pause and ask yourself, which archetype are you playing in your own negotiations? Are you the distracted soldier, the raging man against the empty boat, the pawn unaware of the larger game? Or can you rise to become the strategist, the hero, the one who bends chaos into clarity? The stories whisper that you can, if only you dare to see yourself as more than a victim of circumstance. This journey is far from over. We have explored the myths, but now we must translate them into daily practice. It is one thing to admire archetypes and allegories, another to embody them in the face of email inboxes, fractured relationships, and the relentless pull of comfort. To continue, we must ground the symbolic into the practical, to see how these grand insights shape real-world choices. Before we move on, I invite you once more. If these words stir something within, if they resonate like a forgotten truth, then subscribe to Mindset Mastery Hub. Not to follow, but to journey with others who are reclaiming their power, their clarity, their emotional sovereignty. This is not about watching, it is about transforming. Each video is a torch along the path, a reminder that you are not alone in this cosmic negotiation. To walk among myths and archetypes is inspiring, but if they remain in the realm of poetry, they risk becoming distant stars, beautiful to gaze upon, yet offering no warmth. The true power of Sun Tzu's art of war and the symbolic strategies embodied in Trump's negotiation style lies in their capacity to descend into the soil of our daily lives. Wisdom must not remain abstract. It must become breath, habit, and action. Only then can it transform. Let us begin with the battlefield that most of us know too well, the mind under siege. In the digital age, distraction is not an occasional visitor, but a permanent army camped at the gates of our attention. Notifications arrive like cavalry charges. Endless news feeds swirl like dust storms. In such an environment, negotiation is not merely with others, but with the endless impulses within ourselves. Sun Tzu reminds us, the supreme art of war is to subdue the enemy without fighting. The modern translation might be, subdue distraction not with endless willpower, but with strategy. Instead of fighting every temptation individually, shape your environment so that the temptations lose their force. Trump in his negotiation tactics often redefine the environment itself, forcing the media, the market, or the meeting table to revolve around his framing. Likewise, you can shift your environment to favor clarity, silence the unnecessary, arrange your space as though it were a battlefield prepared for victory. Consider social anxiety, another battlefield where invisible wars rage. In a crowded room, the anxious heart races. The inner voice whispers defeat before words are spoken. How does Sun Tzu advise here? He tells us that the greatest general makes himself invincible, not by strength, but by eliminating vulnerability. The vulnerable mind is one that fixates on others' perceptions, surrendering frame control before the conversation begins. Trump's negotiation style, polarizing though it is, demonstrates a stark inversion. He rarely bends to the frame of others. He imposes his own. To integrate this practically does not mean imitating his bravado, but rather recognizing that your power in social settings lies not in being liked by all, but in defining your presence with clarity. Stand as though your very posture declares, "I know who I am." In doing so, you reclaim sovereignty over the battlefield of perception. There is also the daily war with excuses, the silent erosion of purpose that whispers, "Not today, maybe tomorrow." Here, we find resonance between Sun Tzu, modern motivational voices, and the grind ethic of discipline equals freedom. Sun Tzu prepared his armies not through improvisation, but through ritual discipline. They drilled until responses were automatic, until hesitation vanished. Trump, too, understood the power of relentless repetition, repeating themes, slogans, and positions until they carved pathways in the collective psyche. Likewise, you must repeat your chosen disciplines until they form grooves in your mind deeper than your excuses. Every morning you rise when comfort tempts you, you are enacting your own art of war. Every moment you choose focus over distraction, you are redefining the battlefield of habit. But practical integration also requires adaptability. Sun Tzu compared the ideal general to water, shaping itself to the terrain, flowing around obstacles, never clinging to rigidity. Trump's negotiation style often confounded critics precisely because of this adaptability. One moment confrontational, the next conciliatory, always fluid in response to shifting dynamics. In your life, this means refusing to anchor yourself to brittle expectations. A setback at work, a rejection in love, an unexpected crisis. These are not defeats unless you insist on rigidity. To embody water is to bend without breaking, to reframe failure as terrain to be navigated. In this lies mental toughness, the ability to endure storms not by resisting them head-on, but by channeling their force into new directions. Take, for instance, the daily negotiation of relationships. Whether in business or personal life, conflict often arises not from objective differences, but from clashing perceptions. Sun Tzu's axiom, "Appear weak when you are strong, and strong when you are weak," may sound manipulative, but at its heart is the principle of strategic empathy. To negotiate effectively, you must enter the other's frame, see the battlefield through their eyes, and then act with anticipatory awareness. Trump's style often involved overstating strength to unsettle adversaries, yet the principle can be inverted compassionately. Sometimes appearing soft disarms hostility, while quiet strength commands respect. Integration here is not about dominance, but about balance. Learning when to yield and when to assert, when to speak and when silence is the sharpest blade. The realm of career and business provides another fertile field. Imagine a job interview as a battlefield. Most candidates walk in defensive, hoping to avoid mistakes, but Sun Tzu never counseled passivity. He taught to seize initiative, to shape the battlefield before the enemy advances. Trump, in negotiations, rarely waited to see what terms would be offered. He set terms up front, making others adjust to him. You can adopt the same principle without arrogance. Frame the conversation around your strengths, introduce stories that highlight your unique value, ask questions that shift the energy from interrogation to collaboration. In doing so, you are not merely responding, you are defining. And what of the negotiation with self-image, the most silent yet most relentless war? Many live as prisoners of an inner narrative that whispers of inadequacy. Sun Tzu would remind us, victorious warriors win first and then go to war, while defeated warriors go to war first and then seek to win. Victory begins in the mind. If you approach challenges with the assumption of defeat, you have already surrendered. Trump's brash confidence, often criticized as overblown, nonetheless embodies a core principle. Act as though victory is inevitable, and others will begin to align with that perception. This does not mean delusion. It means cultivating a growth mindset so unshakable that setbacks are absorbed into a larger narrative of eventual triumph. To walk into life with this conviction is to win first before the war begins. Of course, integration must also address suffering. Viktor Frankl's testimony from the concentration camps revealed that even in the harshest conditions, meaning is the ultimate weapon. Sun Tzu, too, taught that armies crumble without purpose. Trump's negotiations, beyond tactics, often revolved around a singular theme, framing everything as a deal, a purpose-driven exchange where stakes are clear. In your life, reconnecting with purpose is the antidote to despair. When you know why you are doing what you are doing, why you rise at dawn, why you resist excuses, why you pursue growth, the chaos of circumstance loses its power. Without purpose, even small struggles crush the spirit. With purpose, even immense burdens can be carried with dignity. As we weave these threads, the picture clarifies. The art of war, Trump's strategies, Stoic philosophy, Jungian psychology, modern neuroscience all converge on a single truth. Life is negotiation, every day, every moment. Your clarity determines your power. Your discipline determines your freedom. Your ability to control the frame, adapt like water, and reconnect with purpose determines whether you drift aimlessly or march toward destiny. And so, as you consider the emails awaiting you, the conversations you must face, the battles with your own procrastination, remember, you are already on the battlefield. The only question is whether you step forward with strategy or stumble forward with excuses. This is not theory. It is the pulse of your daily existence, the hidden architecture of victory or defeat. We have journeyed from the anxieties of modern existence into the strategic clarity of Sun Tzu, from the unpredictable theatrics of Donald Trump's negotiation style into the timeless archetypes of myth, and finally down into the soil of practical integration. Now, as we arrive at the conclusion, the question lingers: what will you do with this knowledge? Knowledge, after all, is not transformation. You may study Sun Tzu, quote Jung, admire Napoleon Hill, or even watch Trump spar across negotiation tables. But if this remains entertainment, the battlefield of your own life remains unchanged. The truth is uncomfortable yet liberating. No mentor, no book, no video can live your war for you. Each morning, each choice, each conversation is yours to command or surrender. That is the essence of mindset mastery. And here lies the great paradox. Sun Tzu told us that the supreme art of war is to win without fighting. Yet, in the inner realm, you must fight. You must battle laziness, excuses, fear, self-doubt, and the gravitational pull of mediocrity. Trump's style may reveal the theater of external conflict, but your greater challenge is internal. Do you negotiate with your excuses, or do you declare victory over them? Every day you delay, every time you surrender to comfort, you make a deal with defeat. But each time you rise early, each time you choose focus over distraction, each time you discipline your emotions, you seize the high ground of your own destiny. Consider the imagery of rivers again. Sun Tzu likens strategy to water, flowing into the cracks of vulnerability. Life too flows into the cracks you leave unguarded. If your purpose is unclear, chaos floods in. If your discipline falters, excuses slip through. But when your walls are strong, when you claim emotional sovereignty, life's current ceases to batter you. It begins to carry you. This is the transformation we seek, to stop being victims of circumstance and become architects of our fate. The myths remind us of this eternal rhythm. The hero's journey ends not with victory over an enemy, but with transformation of the self. Jung reminds us that true integration comes not from projecting the shadow onto others, but by embracing and transforming it within. The Stoics remind us that freedom is found not in avoiding suffering, but in mastering how we meet it. Trump's negotiation theatrics, however controversial, show us that reality bends to those who control perception. And Sun Tzu, the ancient strategist, assures us that once you master terrain, timing, and self, you can walk through chaos without fear. What does this mean for you? It means you are not powerless. It means the storms of distraction, anxiety, and doubt are not destiny. They are terrains to be navigated. Your phone buzzing with notifications, your boss's criticism, your partner's silence, your own hesitation at the threshold of a dream. These are not random torments. They are invitations to practice. They are your training grounds. To treat them as mere frustrations is to miss the deeper design. To meet them as trials in your own art of war is to claim them as allies in your transformation. But transformation demands commitment. The ancients knew this. A general who hesitated lost the battle. A philosopher who only spoke wisdom but failed to live it was a hypocrite. A negotiator who played timidly never claimed advantage. And so with you, the call is not to admire but to act. To look at your life as it stands now and ask, where have I surrendered without realizing? Where have I been negotiating with my own mediocrity? Where am I waiting for the world to change rather than mastering the battlefield within? If you sense the stirrings of this truth, then this is your moment. Not tomorrow, not someday, now. Every delay is a silent defeat. Every hesitation is a gift to the enemy of purpose. Discipline equals freedom. Growth mindset equals survival. No more excuses. Your war is already happening, and neutrality is an illusion. The only question is, will you fight with clarity or will you drift in chaos? And this is where I extend the final invitation. Subscribe to Mindset Mastery Hub, not as an act of casual interest, but as a declaration of war against your excuses. Join a community that does not shy away from discomfort, that seeks wisdom not for entertainment, but for transformation. Each video here is a weapon sharpened for the modern battlefield of the mind, crafted to help you reclaim clarity, emotional sovereignty, and the discipline to live as more than a spectator of your own life. Let this channel be the ally you consult before every battle, the voice that reminds you to stand tall when the world presses down. But subscribing is not the end. It is only the next step on your journey. For there is another frontier, another layer of wisdom waiting to be uncovered. If this exploration of Sun Tzu and Trump's negotiation style has opened your eyes to strategy and perception, then the next video will lead you deeper into the archetypal roots of leadership itself. The title is Donald Trump's Polarizing Leadership and the Jungian King Archetype. Within it, you will discover how power, authority, and the psyche intertwine, and how the king archetype, balanced or corrupted, shapes not only leaders, but the destinies of those who follow them. It is the inevitable next step in your journey, a torch to light the darker chambers of understanding. So here we stand, at the close of one journey and the threshold of another. Ancient wisdom has spoken, modern clarity has been revealed. The stage is set, the strategies unfolded. But the story does not end here. It begins again with you, your choices, your mindset, your transformation. Walk forward with clarity, reclaim your sovereignty, master your negotiation with life itself. For in the end, war is not fought on distant fields. It is fought in the silence of your own mind, in the rhythm of your habits, in the courage of your heart. And victory is not given. It is chosen.